So Magic, now that we've covered or established what data science is, let's talk about the three things that you mentioned in the previous video about the failure rates in data science. And you said that it is a multi-step process. Tell me more about that.
So before I go any further with this, I'd like to say that business leaders, I think it's my opinion, a bit too often just check out in terms of monitoring and understanding what's happening in that process. And that would be fine if it was working well, if it was a well-oiled machine, but it's not. There are huge delays, it fails left, front and center, and they are paying for it. So I think what we are trying to do here is to simplify it as much as possible. And what I will try to do is, it will be slightly different process than you can read out there, because I wanted to surface these key steps where these projects fail.
Okay.
Step number one is defining business problem. And it goes much deeper than just, oh, we are focusing on customer churn or on fraud. No, you need to define very specifically, if it's churn, you are going to tackle, who is your customer? What is this churn event? If it's fraud, you need to walk through, and historically decide which transactions would have been fraudulent. If it's predictive maintenance, then you would need to decide which states of the machine are considered a failure. And it's becoming tricky at this stage where to do it right, you really need to almost like have a time machine in your head and go back to the past and ask yourself a question, well, when would you make a decision? So for instance, for customers, which customers and when would you target with a marketing campaign? For a fraud, it would be which transactions and when would you try to stop? For a machine, it would be going back in time and saying, well, at which point in time you would make this decision about stopping the factorial line?
Yeah, this is becoming very clear to me that defining business problems is not a straightforward process and can be very difficult. So what would be the next step then, Magic?
The next step is taking this business definition described by language and converting it to a data definition. And it takes a form of a table with several columns which describe, the customers, timestamps, and when would we make this decision, or when the stuff happened that we would have acted upon. So that's called labeling or target definition.
Because machine learning needs them to work.
Yes, exactly.
Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's a starting point for the third step, which is when we tap to the source database and we translate data that resides in it into the format digestible by machine learning. And it's usually quite a bit of effort goes into that step. Once that's done, then we can do machine learning.
Now the machine learning can happen.
Yes, that's the fun part.
If you say so.
After that's done, then we have this critical step of meeting with the business stakeholders and explaining where the money went. And we are essentially selling the model. That's how we often call it, where we try to explain the findings, what correlates with the targets, what potentially can be done with this. And after that, and it's often optional, it's the last step of deploying the model to production.
Did you say it's often optional, deploying the model?
Yes, it's often optional, and let me explain why. So there are two main reasons for that. One is where it was decided on this business review meeting that something went wrong and we need to redo some things, or maybe model is too weak and it's just not worth deploying. It's legitimate reasons why you may abandon the deployment. The second reason is actually much more normal. It's when the project was not about the model, the project was about the insights from the very beginning, and the model deployment was never in the project plan. So machine learning was used to slice and dice through this large data to help us find the golden nuggets, the correlation, and to build up understanding of what correlates with our KPIs. But the model deployment was never in the plan, so we just don't deploy it.
Okay, I guess I figured that the deployment was always the outcome, but it's if you don't deploy a model, then that's not a failure, is what you're saying.
It depends on the project objectives, yes.
Okay, what I think is really important right now, Maciek, is that we break these steps down into percentages of effort and how much effort goes into them individually.
Well, this is vastly varied, of course, but we'll try to average here, right?
And I won't hold you to a Maciek, so it's good.
Thank you. So for step one, I would attribute around 5% of the project time. For step two, labeling the data, 10%. For the translation bit, around 65%. Machine learning, 5%. Business meetings, 5%. And model deployment, if it happens, 10%.
So you're saying that the bulk of the work actually occurs before you get to the machine learning, Maciek?
Yes. It's on average 80%, typically.
Wow.
And it's quite frustrating when you work on this project and you can't really see much of an outcome for most part of it. You're only getting to the fun part by the end of it.
So I'm curious, Maciek, is there any particular place out of these 6 steps that it actually breaks down and is more problematic?
So look, where doesn't it fail?
Or doesn't it fail?
On the very beginning, you had a feeling how complex maybe the first step of defining business problem. Actually, I would estimate that easily 50% of projects fail on one of these first 2 steps.
50% fail in the first 2 steps.
Yeah, and not even always you realize that later. It's very insidious failure where you can deliver and deploy models and they are incorrect. They may be counterproductive because something went wrong in one of those first 2 steps. Then translating the database to analytical data set, it's such a long slog that data scientists very often just get stuck in it and never get through. Actually, the one step that is less prone to fail is the machine learning.
Is that because what they're studying all the time?
Exactly. There's a lot of practice, there is a whole body of knowledge, there is a lot of opportunities to learn how to do it. So it's for the most part smooth sailing, and it's usually just machine doing all the heavy lifting here. And then you have the meeting with the business where the findings are very often like torch to the ground by the business because of the nature of them, sometimes because of the numbers that are surfaced by data scientists. And at the same time, business stakeholders are not really sure what they are getting. Data scientists throw 200 charts at them. It's really a shit show that very often just go off the rails. And then you move to model deployment where you have all these huge data pipelines built during the development process. And then also you have a model. And it's quite difficult to get this into production. So it fails at that stage as well.
So I'm curious, Maciek, how many times have you done this process?
I wouldn't know. What I can tell you is that we delivered this, me with my teams, we delivered those projects to over 30 different organizations by now, and number of models is probably in the hundreds.
Okay, and not to put you on the spot here, but how many times did you fail?
Well, how many times have we failed? It's we definitely know now when I look back about models we deployed that were never used. I definitely know we were failing early in the days during business meetings. But what I'm most afraid of probably is we know definitely we were failing during defining business problems and when labeling the data because we detected that later. And sometimes it's even a part of expectations that you will discover that you mislabeled the data. What I'm most afraid of is that we never detected it when we misdefined the business problem, we mislabeled the data, and we never saw it. And the models.
And you're none the wiser
Yeah.
as to why it failed.
Yeah. Well, officially it's not a failure. The models were delivered, everything is working, the business decisions are made based on this. No one ever spotted that something was messed up at that stage, and everybody signed it off.
Okay, well, this has been very informative into the 6-step process, and I think we're going to bring this video to an end and talk in our next video about academia.
All right, take care.
Okay, thank you, Master.